Josh, for inviting me here to speak. It's a privilege, and I'll move over here so maybe that won't ring so bad. I'll give you a rundown on my operation here. I'm going to tie it in with wildlife at the end. I've got 142 slides. I doubt we'll get them through them all, but we'll fasten our seatbelts and we'll see what we can get done. There's more to say about this picture at the end. I'll just give you a background on it. It's the deer that I killed last year. It was the #1 crossbow kill in the state of Kansas. I got to hold that title for 11 months, but there was a gentleman from Nemaha County, Kansas, that killed one bigger than mine this year. So I was able to hold that title for 11 months, but it's been an awesome ride. And that picture right there wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have met some of the people in this room and if I hadn't dedicated to changing my ways on my farm. And it really all started with the soil. So as we go along here, we'll just look at some pictures and some different things, and I'll try to give you an explanation. But we had a chance to rent this farm from the University of Kansas State. It's near my house, and through a pretty neat set of circumstances, we were able to get it, and we're in the process of trying to regenerate this degraded farm. But in the 15 seconds I've been talking, how many of you noticed that big buck in the background? Raise your hand. How many of you noticed the Boone and Crockett raccoon taking a selfie on the right-hand side? All right, now you're my folks right there. You're paying attention. All right. Lots of times we get in here, we drink from a fire hose, send everybody out, go change your ways, go do your thing. But very seldom do we really put it into practice, what that slide says right there. You know, tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember. But the critical piece of that is involving people. That's why sometimes we do soil health events, sometimes we invite people to our farms, sometimes we travel across the country. So I threw a few slides in here just to show you where I started. I was able to go to the bank, borrow the money to buy this 4420 combine. This was back in '05. I had 60 acres of farm, and those were my 2 wagons. And along the way, I'll give you just a little background real quick. I'm the kid that grew up in small town America. Waverly, Kansas is my home. About 500 people, maybe 600. And I wanted to farm desperately growing up, but I bought into the idea that I wouldn't be able to make a living doing it. And so I decided to go do the second thing that I liked the best, and that was to do carpentry work, cabinet making, building homes and whatnot. So for the next 20 years after I graduated from high school, I worked my way up and I was a general contractor building houses in Kansas City. All the while trying to figure out how I could get back to the farm, because that was my #1 thing I wanted to do. And none of us are immune to bad things that happen to us in life. Every one of us, if we took time, could probably raise our hand and give stories of adversity that's invaded our life. But around the time that happened to me in 2004, 2005, and I was thinking about, really what I want to do in life. I'm not getting any younger. I want to go back to the farm. But if I go back, I can't make a living doing it. And if I go back, I got to be successful at it, and I got to find a different way to do it than we did when I was in high school. And that was around the time that I ended up having my first chance to hear Gabe Brown. He's in the middle there. And I threw this slide in here because Jay said he went back to the archives to get that picture of him and Ray and Rick. But I went back into my archives just so you guys could know I knew Russell Hedrick before he was Russell Hedrick. I remember him taking that trip with Ray Archuleta across the state of Kansas for that week or 2 weeks, whatever it was, and they stopped by and spent the night at my folks'. We have a barn there to let visitors stay in, and Gabe was there for a conference in Emporia, and so it was pretty cool to get down and I had known Gabe and Ray a little bit prior to this. But I remember Russell sitting on the couch talking to Gabe, telling him, I'd really like to travel around And I'd really like to, go to soil health events and speak and tell my story. And I just remember rolling my eyes, sitting on the couch going, dude, you don't know what you're asking for if you're going to travel that much. And then the story unfolds from there. And it's neat to be back here. I haven't been on the speaking circuit for a while, but it's neat to be here today and just think about where some of these guys have ended up, where we've all ended up, because a lot of us have known each other for quite some time. So that was all of us standing in the pasture. That was my first group of cows we bought. And, we were trying to learn how to rotationally graze and everything. And this is the first chance I've had to speak since Dave passed away. And I can echo what you've already heard from Lauren and whatnot. Hands down, this guy right here did more for me in my operation and where I'm at today than any one person. I went to his farm. I visited it. He was impressed that I would drive there all the way from Kansas. He threw me in his side-by-side. He took me out and he involved me. That's where I was going with this whole thing. He dug some holes, showed me what the soil was supposed to look like, and I'm with Lauren. I wish he was here today so I could show him some of the pictures on my farm, 12 years later after he helped me get started. There's all kinds of adversity. There's all kinds of things that we have to, look past. So if you were to just come to my farm and I dug a soil pit, this is what you'd see. This happens to be the foundation to my house. It's the last house that I built as a general contractor before I went full-time farming. So to say that the topsoil is important on my operation is an understatement. I don't have 6 feet. I don't have 5 feet. Not quite as bad as Oklahoma, but I'm not as good as Iowa. Some pictures you'd see if you were driving around our countryside of the tillage operations, things that you'll see, when they're combining, things you'll see when it's really wet in the spring and you can't get the corn sprayed, things you'll see right down the road. For me, from my house, I run a little side operation when I'm done harvesting of digging ponds, clearing brush for neighbors, and this is a pond I dug out. I took that picture while I was sitting in the middle of it. That's 5 feet of nothing but silt. You can see all the piles of dirt we dug out of it. Wonder where that came from. Right there. It's already been established through the principles that have been taught here today about what it takes to keep that soil in place. This happens to be my neighbor across the road now. He's running a John Deere drill on 10-inch centers. I realize there may be a little more disturbance because he's running 40-foot rig. But that's him planting soybeans. He planted them really early this year, which is fine. And then we were planting corn about a week later, right across the road. And I didn't have any cover crops out there this year, but this is long-term no-till. We were planting behind soybeans, and you can see the difference in the planter. This is a terrace. I don't have time to go into detail on how I got this property, but it was a really cool situation. And the previous farmer had this terrace would break over every year. And if you were to drive into Waverly, you would see it going by all the time. And it used to drive me nuts, and I never even owned the farm because I was trying to work on erosion issues and stuff. And there would be a 3-foot ditch right in there about 100 yards from the road every year. And they would till the soil profusely and red, it's not even black soil anymore, it's red now. And it'd be swirling, blowing all over the place. So when we were able to purchase that farm, we fixed that terrace and started no-till and doing cover crops, and it's never broke since. And people around town don't have to deal with the soil blowing through their windows and across the road and whatnot. So we tried to integrate livestock. As you'll probably figure out as I go along here, I have one employee, full-time employee. I don't have any kids. I wish that was different, but it's the hand that we've been dealt. So we're going on with life, doing the best we can do on our operation. And it's one reason I'm not able to travel around as much as some of the other guys are and share about their stories. So when I do, I take it seriously, and that's why I say I'm thankful that they gave me the opportunity to come here today. We run British white cows. We try to rotationally graze as much as we can. Soil without biology is simply geology. I don't know if Ray's in the room or not, but I'll tell a quick fib on him. we were sitting in the room down at the Oklahoma no-till conference about the time Jimmy Emmons was coming on the scene, and Rick Haney's test was coming on the scene, and Rick and Jonathan Cobb and Ray and I were sitting in a room, and we were talking about soil blowing, and I don't know how I got it in my head, but I was talking about a backhoe digging up dirt, and Ray and I kind of both looked at each other in similar fashion, and I just kept saying, it's almost like soil's people just dig it up, just till it up. It's almost like a geology experience, and we kind of both looked at each other at the same time and said, soil without biology is simply geology. Now, he's a lot more famous than I am, so he got credit for that, but I'm throwing it out there that, sometimes even the great ones need a little bit of help. So, we show this slide. Our whole goal is to increase our organic matter levels on our farm. We want to talk in terms of not how many bushels of beans or corn or milo or wheat we made. We want to talk in terms of how many dollars an acre did we make off of that crop, rather than say, oh, we got 4 inches of rain. Well, how much rain did we get in our soil? Those are the terms that we try to talk about. And so I just have number one goal. When I started this was to stop erosion, but then as the process went along, we learned a lot, and now, we have multiple goals on our farm. And, here's a milpa garden mix that we got from Green Cover Seeds. I don't have time to show you all the pictures of all the fruit, of all the things you could do with this. But especially if you have a small acreage and you're wanting to produce vegetables in an organic way or whatever, if you haven't heard about this, you need to research it and try it. So what I did, I don't think I've got the picture. Well, I do. There on the left side of my screen anyway. You can see the corn growing, and then you can see the squash. And Brian Burns is here for Green Cover Seeds. You have to talk to him. I don't know everything that's in there, but there's a lot. And so what I did is I drilled the milpa garden mix, and I left about one side of the drill, whatever the distance was, 10 or 12 feet, empty. And I went ahead and drilled, and then I came back with a planter. I have a 4-row plot planter that I planted that I can no-till my corn and stuff with. And so I actually planted the corn into the blank spaces in between where I had drilled the milpa garden mix. I thought, hey, that might just work. Well, anytime you got to stick your forklift bucket in there to get all your sweet corn out of there and you can't see the kid in there throwing it out of there, it's an issue. So we had sweet corn, which is good, like crazy. The year before, we had all kinds of squash, cucumbers, zucchini, spaghetti squash. But one of the fun things we did is we had a pumpkin patch. Now, it wasn't where we could have everybody come out and pick them, but we grew it, and then we picked them, and then we took them to different organizations, different churches, just different organizations. I opened it up for people to come out and pick them up for their kids. And if you think that's impressive, that was the 3rd trailer load. Do not plant more pumpkins than you have the help to pick. I can tell you that. We had pie pumpkins. I don't remember how many pounds of pie pumpkins we had, but I had it figured up at one time. It was like you could have made 892 pumpkin pies that year with all the stuff we had. So here's a video that's going to play. I run a case drill. I also have a John Deere drill, and then you also saw the case planter. But this is us planting into rye, planting soybeans into rye at my farm. You saw the cattle grazing earlier. That was at the same farm. Monty did a great job. I'm not as far along as he is, but he did a great job on the grazing deal, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that so we can get to the wildlife aspect of this. This is what another farm would look like. You see how we didn't have to use a roller crimper lots of times on 7.5-inch centers. If you hit that rye or triticale, whichever you're using at the right stage, a lot of times it'll lay down on its own. This happened to be a wet year. This got to where it almost made hard seeds. That's why you're seeing it looking brown like that. We used to have a roller crimper, or no, that's not a roller crimper, but that is a roller crimper, but it's not the style like Dave Brandt and those used to sell. Cultipacker's what that is. And it worked, but I would recommend a roller crimper if that's what you're going to do. So anytime that we can't get a fall seeded cover crop in, we rely on oats. Sometimes we mix peas in there with it. And this particular picture, you're looking at us with the John Deere drill, drilling soybeans into our oats that spring. Here's a video playing. This is kind of the setup that would be ideal. I know it's an expensive setup, but if you're into food plotting, wildlife, even farming on a smaller scale, it's a 15-foot drill, and then he has a roller crimper mounted to the front of his tractor there. And this kid I went to high school with, and he's an engineer, and he got his family farm, and he wanted somebody to regeneratively farm it. He heard about me. Even though we lived in the same town, we hadn't talked to each other for a long time. Long story short, I've been farming his farm now for 4 or 5 years on a larger scale. It's about 300 acres, and doing some of these things, and it's incredible. So here's the soybeans at a 2-week stage with no spray application whatsoever. Here they are at 4 weeks, and then here's a variety. This is, not the field, but the next slide will be. This is a variety of non-GMO soybeans that we used to grow for wheel cross that we could capture a premium on. This is that field where I gave you the step-by-step. And we got to that place with non-GMO soybeans with no chemical that year in 2017. What I will say about the non-GMO premium and the non-GMO world is the markets can come and go. It depends on where you're at. I would not discourage anybody from trying it, but what I would say is you can't hear me talk and think it's a slam dunk. You may not have the market close enough to you. You may eat up your premium in trucking and whatnot, but don't let that deter you from seeing what other markets are out there. I found a lot of markets around me that I didn't even know were there. So I wanted to throw some pictures in here that would show you we weren't a one-hit wonder, different seasons. And I should preface this, because you guys are probably looking at that 50 bushel thinking, that ain't no big deal. Well, it is to me, because our county average is about 28 to 30 bushel on soybeans, 95 to 98 on corn. I don't know what the wheat average is, but if you were in my neck of the woods, corn and beans is what you would see mostly. So when we hit 50 bushel on our farm, we've done something, and when we do it without hardly any inputs in it, then we're talking about profitability per acre. Just threw another picture in there to show you some of the non-GMO beans and the lack of weed pressure. I would not want to tackle the non-GMO world without cover crops. I would not want to do it just solely based on chemical. So this year, no-till corn's kind of been the thing I've struggled with the most over the years. We have a lot of wet springs. Corn doesn't like wet weather. But this year we had a real good spring to get things in, and I got it done right. And so I custom harvest for my neighbor and some other people around who do anhydrous, chisel the ground, anhydrous, field cultivate. I think it gets worked 4 times before the corn goes in. And you can see the difference. My corn's on the right and their corn's on the left. And then we went to just before harvest time, and my corn is on the left, and then the other 3 fields is in the middle right there. And so we harvested some 97 to 113 bushel corn, and a lot of those cornfields in the middle there were anywhere from 60 to 75. So you can see the difference when you don't get a cover crop growing. For whatever reason, the drill decided to shut off on its own, because I guess it wanted to have a great crop of mare's tail growing right there instead of barley, which really irritates me. But it is what it is, and you can see the difference when you don't cover the ground. Something's going to grow there. So here you are with my neighbor's tillage soybeans, a lot of field cultivating going on. You can see the shallow root depth, the hard pan, little crusty spot. And when we started doing down this road of soil health, this is what our soils look like. You can see that plate line, the cracks right there, you can see the platiness. And then after several years of continuing to do cover crops, that's what we're looking like now. And really, I could just end the whole talk on that picture right there, because if I don't have that, none of the rest of this talk's worth a hoot. You can see the difference in the soybeans. The far ones on the left were some neighbors. They were the Enlist beans, I believe, when they came out. No, they were Liberty Link beans. And then the 2 middle ones and the 2 right ones are my field, and the farthest right one is the longest term no-till. So just after 2 years of doing no-till, this is what our soybean roots started looking like. They used to look like that my neighbor's tillage, where the roots were only about yay big, but if we could, we probably can't see it, but you might be able to with nodulation and stuff on there. That wasn't any seed treatment. I didn't have any inoculant or anything. That was just the turnaround of 2 years of rye as a cover crop. Can you guys see the line in the middle of that picture, hopefully? That's the road ditch. Actually, that's on my property. And at the top of the picture where you see the dirty, milky looking water, that comes in off of my neighbor's tilled field across the road. And then the water closest to us in the picture ran out of my waterway, out of my field. And we had a really big rain event. And I was driving down the gravel road and I looked off to my right and I'm like, man, there's a definite line down there. And so I ran back home. I got the four-wheeler and drove all the way out there and took that picture. And really that speaks volumes, because this is what this drainage ditch looks like just right down the road from my house. It's looked like that for 4 years now, and nothing ever gets done about it, and we have to drive through all that mud in the gravel road. And we've got the ways to fix it, but it just never gets done. So when I first started, this is way back when, I started taking jars around, dipping them in, I'm telling you, people thought I was crazy for doing some of the things we do, but really this isn't that hard of a test if you just kind of want to see what's leaving your field. Just took some clear jars, dipped them in the road ditch. I didn't go on anybody's property. All this water, it's worth noting that the water in that picture had been filtered through a waterway for approximately at least 100 yards before it got to the road ditch. You can see my field on the right was first time no-till with first time cover crops. And then in the middle field was a neighbor who just did no-till with no cover crops. And then the tillage field is in the background right there. And that guy, I shelled the corn off of that, and then he ran his cows out there. So then later in the year, I think let me put my glasses on. It's a sad day when you got to wear your glasses. August, anyway, so we got crops growing. I got soybeans, they got soybeans or corn. And I know it's a monoculture, but just look at the difference in the water quality with just having something growing on there. But if you had to take a drink out of one of those jars, which one would you want to take a drink out of? The one on the far right, you can see the clouds through the jar. I'm going to go out on a scientific limb and say that there's very little fertilizer and issues with that jar of water compared to the other two. So this is a famous slide that Ray shows a lot about the smorgasbords of the root systems, why we want diversity in our cover crops. This is a first-time cover crop I did. There's earthworms in there, there's ladybugs. So we started experimenting with some of these cover crops, and I happen to farm along the blacktop and the highway just about everywhere, so I cannot go hide in the back 40 and play with these, except in my deer plots, because my deer plots are hidden from the road. So this happened to be a floor mix that Green Cover had. And if you don't know what the floor mix is, you can ask them. But it's a variety, and it came up real good. And it was crazy, the pollinators we had out there. And that really got me going on the mixes. So sometimes you'll get a volunteer cover crop. The longer you do this, sometimes things will go back to seed. Sometimes you will take advantage of a volunteer cover crop. But if I could take you and show you a perfect cover crop for fall grazing or deer plots or something to plant, or what it would look like after a wheat crop or triticale or rye or oats, that would be it. And we happen to have enough moisture that year for that to look that good at our field day. I'm going to switch gears here just a little bit and talk about the food plots and the habitat. But before I do that, one thing I failed to mention is the importance of family and friends. I've made a lot of friends through the soil health movement, meeting people. It can't go understated that life's short enough the way it is. We don't need to add drama. We don't need to add problems. They invade our lives on their own. And that's kind of my goal in doing what I'm doing, is to have less drama, have less problems, and involve more people in the success stories of what we can do, mostly through hunting, but also through sharing our story. And then I didn't finish that very third slide I showed you with Russell and Gabe. The guy on the right was my dad, and he passed away 2.5 years ago. And he made everything possible for me. He wasn't the dad. Like, I was the kid that went to the soil health event, and I came home with all these great wild ideas, and he wasn't the dad that said, no, you can't do it. He was the dad that says, I'll give you some space, but if you screw up, I'm going to pound your head in. And like, hey, give me 2 years. I don't know, maybe some of the guys in here can correct me. I think I told him, give me 5 years, and if you see after 5 years that this isn't working, I'll go back to doing it the other way. And after the second and third year, we had cut some 50 bushel beans, and the third year I had him riding in the combine when we had 100 acres make 65 bushel. And he just looked at me like this in the combine. He said, yeah, the 5-year trial's over. He said, let's get on with it. And so as a son, that made me feel real special, and I miss those days. But he helped us get the land, and I just want to publicly say my dad was my biggest cheerleader, and I'm proud to be his son. So you know how the credit card company says, what's in your wallet? So every time I post something on Facebook with a food plot, I always say, what's in your food plot? And so I try to show people, this is a field of triticale. This happens to be where I killed that big giant buck last year. And the triticale went on, and I let it make seed. And we came in there, and then we drilled this fall blend that I got from Green Cover Seeds. We didn't have a lot of rain, but it did come up and do fairly decent. But if you went out there today, all that seed that's in that triticale is laying in the ground with all the rain we've gotten. It's probably, I haven't been out there to get a picture, but it's probably up about 3 inches. So that's what a deer plot mix, sunflowers, sun hemp, millet. It could have soybeans in it, could have cowpeas, could have mung beans, a few turnips, radishes. I don't have the exact poundage on it, but you can visit with me later if you want to know about that. But that's what it looked like coming up in extremely, 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 extremely dry conditions. I'm looking for forage during rifle season in my food plots. And before, when I was just planting soybeans or a clover or whatever, and we'd have a drought, I wouldn't have anything for the deer to feed on during rifle season. And our rifle season just closed Sunday night. It's open the Wednesday after Thanksgiving through the second Sunday afterwards. So it's open about 10 days. And that was always the problem. If we didn't get a deer killed during bow season, then we get to rifle season, we don't have the forage for it. So I was out here with these food plots, going to these conferences, and everybody was focused on cows, and I'm sitting over there by myself going, you guys are missing the boat. These deer don't even know they're going to like this stuff because they're used to eating on corn, soybeans, wheat, or clover. What are they going to do when they see a sunflower head? What are they going to do when they see millet? They're going to do the same thing a cow does. A cow stands there and looks at that sunflower, if he's never had one, and then he goes over and eats the head off of it. Then they think it's pretty cool, and then they think it's really good. So somebody asked me, how do you get deer on your property when they're on the neighbor's property? Plant something that the neighbor doesn't have. Neighbor usually has corn. Neighbor usually has beans. Most neighbors don't have this smorgasbord mix out there for the deer. So that's what our summer looked like right there. It was rough. I don't know how you guys' summer was around here, but ours was brutal. That heat wave we had about melted me. But how important it is to keep your soil covered. You can see the thermometer there where it's bare, and that was on a 100-degree day. You can see there it's 82 degrees where it's covered, and we want to keep that soil temp as close to that 70, 75-degree range as we can, because that's our optimal moisture uptake for the plant, is at that temperature. We get up to them temperatures right there, we're killing off the biology in the soil, nothing's functioning down there the way it should. And it's just like us on a 115-degree day. Are we running full tilt, or are we looking for the shade and a lawn chair and a cup of iced tea? It's imperative that we try to keep that soil covered. So on this next slide, just bear with me. I'll try to show it to you. Can you see on both sides of the picture, there's a deeper green row of double crop soybeans on each side. And they're about 30 feet apart. And that farmer runs a 30-foot header. So this is right next to one of my farms, and I was driving down the road and I saw this. And I saw it on a lot of farms, but this one particular farm, it really stood out. And so now we're forced, if you want to do double crop soybeans, we're forced to insure them. So instead of people putting a focus on a cover crop or a grazing mix or a soil building mix after their wheat, in my neck of the woods, everybody's double cropping soybeans whether they have a chance to come up or not, because they're banking on an insurance payment and trying to make $100 an acre. So to make matters worse, this guy went and baled all the straw off. And those streaks you see right there are the windrows where he baled his straw up. And those streaks, he did not get all the hay rolled up into, so he had a little bit of litter left on the ground because of the fluffiness of the straw. And the lack of rain we had was unreal. But look what would have happened if he'd have spread that straw out over his whole field and not baled it off. Do you think those beans right in the middle there did anything? Can you imagine that whole field looking as green as those strips right there? So it's mindset, you know. Keep that straw spread out as best you can out the back of the combine. Try not to bale it up. If these guys really wanted to have a double crop soybean crop, they would have left as much residue out there. And that farm's a particularly bad farm. So it was impressive that just that little amount of residue, I guess from that slide, just that little amount of residue that's left, look at the difference it made. So back in 2012, we had a drought. I was trying to put food plots together. You can see that deer don't look good at all. Rib cage is showing. Food plots are small. But as we got to going into this, we started picking up pictures of deer like this. I never did get to shoot that deer. But I started getting pictures like that on my camera about a year or two after we started putting a focus on these food plot mixes. We started doing diverse covers. We did some companion mixes. Quick story on this one. We did this awesome sunflower mix that worked out real well. The neighbor across the road had honeybees. I didn't know anything about it. But they came over and they told the landowner that their honey production that year was double. I mean, they just couldn't believe the sweetness of their honey, and they doubled their production. And they wanted to know if I could plant sunflowers out there every year after that. And I told the landowner, I said, where's our cut of the profits? What I want to know, you know. So this is what, let's get into the food plot situation where I'm doing my food plot mixes. If you come to my neck of the woods, I can't believe I'm showing this. I'm showing this because there's probably not anybody local that can see this. But if you notice that it's all sedan grass and millet, and I don't know if we have any deer hunters in here, but I don't know how you're going to shoot something out there that you can't see. So I had a learning curve in doing my food plots and whatnot, but I wanted forage for the rifle season. I wanted cover for those deer to be able to have their fawns in, for the coyotes, the predators, to not have their way with the wildlife. And so I got my sedan grass and millet really thick that year. Here's another picture of what you can do to make a privacy fence. You see the strip in the middle, I got soybeans all around it. See that strip in the middle, that's all soybeans, and I got sedan grass planted around the whole thing. And I had a blind set up there for my dad, and there was free wall hanger bucks coming in off of that timber right there. We don't own that timber. And what you'll see in these slides is I don't own the timber, but I own the farm ground. And so we're making something out of nothing a lot of times with these food plots. This is what it looks like during the early season, September, October. Your privacy fence, you know, to walk into your blind. There's lots of times I can sneak into one of my blinds, climb up in it, sit down, and there'll be deer out there in the field already, and they never saw me get to the blind. I mean, it's a game changer to have these privacy fences. And this is, I just use sedan grass, 18 to 20 pounds. And you do have to have water to make it work, but more often than not, we get it. That's what it looks like. I just took that picture the other day. You can see my soybean field. That's my privacy fence to get in there. That's the millet. That's what it looks like. The reason these warm season mixes are somewhat overlooked is because there's a big push for corn or for beans or for clover. And I used to do a lot of those things, and it was very, like I've stated, it's very seldom I would have a successful food plot all the way through. Now I have warm season mix that there's a smorgasbord of things that the deer can graze on. I'm taking care of the soil at the same time. And these plots don't take near the water as like soybeans or corn does to go through the summertime. These are warm season grasses, warm season mixes. Yeah, they take moisture, but not near as, what the other plots were taking. And so this is a particular plot. I went in there, took some pictures. We had a field day in August, and this is what it looked like at our farm this year. So, you can see the greens right there in my four-wheeler. That's what's usually growing in these lanes. And I didn't finish my story, but on that drone footage, this is what I do, is I mow my lanes in there. Or preferably, I drill in there. I learned real quick that if I mowed this stuff, it shredded it up, it allowed the biology to break it down really fast, and then in the springtime, it wasn't, it was pretty often I'd have a lot of weeds in these mowed paths. So now I try to take the drill and just drill my triticale and peas or turnips or whatever in these lanes. So what I'm doing is that's just farm ground right there, and I don't own the timber around it, but I'm creating habitat on my farm to give them deer a reason to come stay on me. Not just like if I had a cornfield or beans to run over there, grab a snatch of food, and then run out of there. They come in there, they meander around, they're in there for the evening. This is what it looks like, right now. I went out there the other day. You can see the turnips and the triticale growing in it. So that's forage, stockpiled forage. The brown sedan grass is froze out. That's stockpiled forage. Same principle for your cattle, but we're doing it for the livestock. We're doing it for the wildlife. A couple years ago, when we had some rain, that drone footage I showed you, this is what I went in and did. I got these slides out of order, but that's from that drone footage, and I wish I'd have had a drone fly over the thing again. Deer season to me just used to be a few weeks around Thanksgiving and the first couple of weeks of December, and that was it. No need to go hunt early season, no need to go out any other time but then. Then I started doing these plots and monkeying around with some things, and I didn't get it zoomed in, but I hope you can see that giant buck on the right side. I believe that's December 26th, it looks like, that deer showed up. That really changed the way I thought about doing my deer hunting and my food plots and stuff like that, to realize that I could encapsulate the whole year, well, not the whole year, but all of deer season in there instead of just those few weeks. So Monty was talking about setting his fence up. So, during rifle season, if you're out checking your cows and setting your fence up, you may want to carry your deer rifle with you, because this doe was playing hide and seek with that buck, and the buck was just fed up and tired of trying to chase her through the sedan, so he just stopped in the lane, and he just didn't know what direction she was going, and I was taking a picture of him right when she darted out, coming out of nowhere. And I had already killed my deer that year, so I let him go. But that was stockpiled feed in our crop field, that picture that we had for our cattle that year. So we've experienced some things that are pretty unique. We found this 203-inch buck. I think he nets 197 Boone and Crockett in our irrigation lake. Had no history with him, but we assumed that he died in 2012 in the drought. People ask me, how do you go about finding some of the sheds you find? Well, this is how. I plant wheat, I plant rye, I plant triticale, I plant green. You won't see me going through the timber in March getting covered in ticks looking for sheds, because I'll go drive out on the fields, I'll get up on the terraces. Usually I'm running some liquid top dress out of my sprayer, and I can see up from my sprayer, and I can usually see the sheds. I try to get that done before the stuff gets this tall, so we don't pick them all up in the tractor tires and planter tires. As you all can imagine or have experienced, that will happen. So I try to comb the fields. So these are just some of the sheds that we found laying around. So we always try to have fun on the farm. I may be guilty of doctoring a photo with the deer out there a little bit farther or whatever, but that's the way it goes. So I wanted to throw some photos in here of over the years. Again, that this is a successful process. This isn't a one-hit wonder. Most of these deer have come out of that food plot. These were back when my dad was alive and was able to take the pictures and go with me. This is a landowner that was a little skeptical about doing the cover crops, heard some noise from some of my neighbors about what I was doing, and he came to me and he said, I really think you're kind of crazy. Can you explain what you're doing? And I said, I can explain it, but I said, there's a 186-inch deer out there grazing on those sunflowers. You remember the sunflowers with the honey? And he said, there can't be anything that big. And he called me that night screaming and yelling, and I was in the combine, and he says, I got him, you got to come see him. So I drove over there, and I took that picture of him, and he looked at me after I took that picture, and he said, son, you can do cover crops anytime you want. You'll never hear another thing out of me. And I said, well, don't expect me to provide you with a 186-inch deer every year either. So this is Zach Lauk. He used to work for me. He now works for Green Cover Seeds at their second seed facility in southeast Kansas in Iola. And I just leave that picture in there because he's part of the process that helped me get where I was, and that's his daughter after she was born. These are some friends that weren't able to kill some deer one year, and I had extra space to let them come. I don't run an outfitter's business. I could. I don't have time to talk about the income stream, but there is one there. If the Blackleg Ranch, Jerry Doan would be an excellent resource if anybody wants to follow up on that. These are some friends from out of state that I let come hunt with me. I had a pretty good relationship with them, and these are some of the deer that have been killed the last 2 years. I did not have time to upload the photos from this current year. Just for the sake of time. This particular deer was a 173, I believe. I got a couple kids in my church that's our pastor right there, and then these kids coming up are his boys. And I don't know if there's any guys out here or not that reflect on when they were 13 years old, but if I could have killed a deer like that, or like that, when I was his age, I'd have been on cloud 9. He killed a big 12-pointer this year that I don't have pictured. And that's River, his older brother that works for me. There's some of the deer. And again, this is over a time period. We are only allowed to kill one buck a year, antlered deer in the state of Kansas. So on to the story of this big giant buck and how it relates to soil health. Like I said, we made something out of nothing. This is a property that we bought, my dad and I bought, and it was strictly for farming. It only had about 5 acres of timber on it. It's not a place you would look up on an aerial map, and you wouldn't list it with whitetail properties to deer hunt on it. But I got wind that there was this big giant buck running south of Waverly, and my neighbors wouldn't tell me about it, but I was spreading fertilizer one morning, and I straddled a great big shed, and I called him, and I said, is this the shed you guys have been looking for? And he said, yeah, it is. He said, now I'm going to have to tell you the story. And I said, well, you better speak up and tell me what's going on. So my farm was located between point A and point B, and all that buck was doing was using my fence line. I didn't have any timber. I didn't have any reason for that deer to be on my property except to graze my cash crops and to get a drink out of our pond. And we had put a deer camera up, and we had seen a glimpse of him once in a while, and I knew it was a once-in-a-lifetime deer, and I had to do something. So in June, I switched up my planting program. I was supposed to plant soybeans. I had a contract to grow some oats, so I put oats in there because I knew the oats would come off in July, and then I would have a chance to plant a cover crop. Well, then it was so hot and dry, I couldn't put the Ace in the Hole mix in there that I usually do, and so I called Zach up. I got triticale and peas mixed up from Green Cover Seeds. And the last week of August, they were forecasting a rain, and I went out there and I drilled it, and it came up. We did get the rain. And so we set a redneck blind up in there. There was no place to put a tree stand. There was just no real great place for a ground blind, and so I got another redneck and I put it up right there. And then I took that brush cutter and I made some staging areas, and I cut some lanes in there around that pond just to give the deer a little more freedom in that timber so they wouldn't just stay on that fence line. I was just hoping to give them a reason to stay over on my property. And this is what the deer look like in velvet. So you can see why I paid a little bit of attention to trying to kill this deer. This is what he looked like in hardhorn. And we had judged him Nobody knew how many points he had because we never saw him in the daylight. Nobody had ever put their hands on him. We were judging him at 20 points, probably around a 215-inch gross score, Boone and Crockett. And then on this November 16th in the morning, I got that picture, and I had lost track of him for 3 or 4 weeks. I hadn't seen him. I was giving up on him. And so he shows up, and we happen to have the camera on the video, and maybe the video will play. That's the only video I have of this deer. And he's limping a little bit, but I killed him that night. And that Tacticam showed me that he wasn't bedded down with any does, he wasn't on lockdown, and that there's a good chance he'd be in that area if I could get in there that night. So we parked the combine. My hired man said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Don't ask, go home at 2 o'clock. I'm going to the blind, and don't give me any grief about it." So if you can look real close, that's the only daylight picture we had of this particular deer. He was in the road ditch one day with a doe, and my buddies pulled up with his camera and stuck it up over the fence, got a picture of him, and that is the only daylight picture we had of him till the night I killed him. And that's what it looked like after we harvested him. And he crashed right there in the food plot. For the sake of time, I don't have time to go over the whole story. But it developed. That's Wayne, I can't think of his last name, with Buckmasters. The story of the deer really exploded once Buckmasters got a hold of it at the Topeka expo that I was at. One thing led to another, and Buckmasters ended up awarding me Deer of the Year last year, which was a special award, and Jackie Bushman presented it to us in Alabama this last summer. It's not something I ever thought would happen to me or by any stretch of the imagination, but I can stand here today and tell you none of this would have happened if I hadn't have met some of the people I met 10, 12 years ago, and if I hadn't have been putting a concerted effort into the soil health on our farms. That deer had been grazing my no-till cover crops on my farm, unbeknownst to me, because my neighbors were keeping it quiet, and I didn't think that farm was deer huntable, and so I never put a camera out there to get a picture of him. But if you happen to have gotten an edition of Buckmasters, it was in the August edition, the headline to their story was No-Till Magic. And they gave me an opportunity to try to explain my system and give a shout out to David Brandt also. So under the BTR scoring system that Buckmasters has, it grossed 244 and 5/8. And like I say, at that time, it was the #1 crossbow kill in the state of Kansas. So my crew went down there with me. I called them my bodyguards because every night we had to take the deer down and take it back up to the hotel room so somebody wouldn't steal it. And so it kind of took a life of its own, going up and down the elevators and through the hotel, people following us and taking pictures. And so these guys right here, they were my crew, and they started taking selfies. And he even had his own room. Actually, he shared the room with me, but you might have thought I was a little psychotic sitting in there staring at him, but you know, it is what it is. You only get to, I've hunted 35 years and I've never ever laid eyes on a deer like this. And I just think it's a testament to the soil health. You know, there's a lot of things we can solve in life. Our food production, the health of our wildlife, the health of our cattle, the health of, you know, us in general, if we would just take care of our soil the proper way. You know, a little bit on why we don't kill young deer. That's the shed on the right that I found. That's his right side. You can see what he blew up into the next year. You know, obviously there's the arrow, and there's a few more pictures of him, and that's what he looks like in my office on the wall. I put the shed in the mount with him. And then there's the Boone and Crockett score sheet where he grossed 236 and 5/8 and netted 230. Boone and Crockett does not have a separate category for crossbow kills, so it gets booted into the rifle category. The BTR Buckmaster scoring system does have categories for different weapons and things like that nature, and so that's why it is what it is. We build a cooler, and I just want to show you a few pictures of some of the youth that we get on our operation. Like I said, I don't have kids, and I don't need to go into detail. It's just life, and so I try to take every opportunity I can. I met this young lady. Her dad was at a show, and he asked if his daughter could hold it and get a picture taken with it, and I said absolutely. You know, one of the fun things we got to do at the Buckmasters Expo was sit at the table and sign autographs for these kids coming in with their dads and their grandpas and whatnot, and it was a real treat for me, and I can say it was a top-notch experience. So, you know, our watershed lake, I show some of these pictures. It's a big deal for me on our watershed lake. We can irrigate out of that lake to not have fertilizer and runoff going in there and sediment. So, some of these are the activities that we do. We have youth hunts, we have turkey hunts, and again, I could go on and on and on. The state of Kansas doesn't have a fall turkey season this year because apparently the population numbers are down. For the sake of time, I didn't put all the photos in here, but I can show you 6 different farms that have 50 to 60 turkeys on them on our operation where our cover crops are at. We have quail on our farms. I could show you pictures of bobcats that I got just the other morning. I mean, I really could flood you with picture after picture after picture of what the wildlife looks around in what it looks like on our operation. Like I said, that's the last deer that my dad took. I was able to film it with him, and we were able to play it at the funeral, and it was a special deal. And I just always in my presentation giving him credit for everything that he could have been the dad that said, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. You're going to do it the way we've always done it. And I'll throw it out there. There's 2 sides of this coin. The kid goes to the soil health meeting, he comes back, and dad or grandpa says, no, you're not going to do it. But if dad or grandpa says, yeah, I'll let you try it on some acres, that puts a lot of responsibility on that kid to go ahead and take that opportunity and do it right and not waste his opportunity. So there's 2 sides. If we want opportunity and we get it, we better take it and we better do it right. And I'll leave you with that slide right there. It really doesn't matter how big your buck is. This is how you should feel about whatever you do. And it doesn't matter if you farm 5 acres. It doesn't matter if you farm 500 or 5,000 or 7,000 or 10,000. Each and every one of us in this room are where we're at in our life. Each one of us has different goals, different objectives, and I'm not here to rain on anybody's parade because I shot a big deer. I want people to be happy, and I want them to steward the land in such a way that they become profitable. And there's so much more that could be said, but I don't want to flood you with the fire hose, but I'm going to leave you with that. I really wish you guys the best on your farms this year, and I'm proud that I know a lot of people in this room, and I get to have a seat at the soil health table, and I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.